Hey folks, welcome to the Bass Shed Podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. Today on the show is Trevor Jones. Trevor Jones is the house bass player for the Marriott Theatre just outside of Chicago. He also works with Jason Heath on Contrabass Conversations and the Double Bass blog. You should check out both of those. One's a podcast, the other is definitely a blog. Trevor and I cover kind of a variety of topics, from talking about production and some things he's interested in, he's staying artistically engaged with during quarantine. He's gonna talk about that. He's gonna talk about his original group, Molehill. I have links to the band up at thebasshed.com. Go to the podcast page, go to Trevor Jones, and then you will see everything there. And go check out the band. The band's cool. I had not heard the band prior to our conversation, but after our conversation, I went to go check out the band. Really cool stuff. I'm into it. I'm really into it. He's gonna talk about how that there's a Muse vibe, a vibe that is similar to the band Muse. I want to make sure I say that correctly. Yeah, I heard that, but there's some other things too. It's not so kind of, man, I don't know. I kind of hate using descriptors to define music or define somebody else's music. Maybe it's not so theatrical or dramatic. It definitely kind of has some of those epic qualities that Trevor and I will discuss, but it's not this super big thing. I think what I heard a little bit more in Molehill was a little bit more of a Queen influence. Which is funny because I just described it as not theatrical, and Queen was very theatrical. But it doesn't go as far as Muse did, I guess, down that road. I don't know. This is why I hate talking about music, and I always like other people to explain their own music. I think ultimately you should go listen to it and collect your own thoughts about it and see how you emotionally identify with the music. That is always the best all the time. Yeah, there's all that. This is normally where I would plug D-Lake and basses. And that's it. That's my plug. Yeah. Hey, Dan. How you doing, buddy? I got nothing. I talked to him earlier this week. There's not a lot of new stuff to talk about there. There's always a link up at the website. Go check him out. Go check out his website. But that's all I got on D-Lake and basses, but I do want to give them a shout out. Anyways, here's my conversation with Trevor Jones.
How's your day going?
Man, it's like when the highlight of your day is like, well, I did the dishes.
Dude, man, some days it's just not better than that.
Right. No, it's like, well, yeah, I did the dishes. All right. That's a win.
It's like, sometimes my dad and I have always joked about, like, my parents still live in a place where they have a yard. Mm-hmm. And we're always like, man, one of the greatest things ever is like cutting the grass, because you can just look at it and go, oh my God, I accomplished something.
Yeah, I did something.
Yeah. It's right. Like, that's the battle some days. It's like, I just want to say I did something.
Right. Yeah. And like, I was on the phone earlier with my dad today, and he's like, he's kind of like went through the list of just chores that he's gotten done and like the ones that he's looking to do. Like they painted the house. My folks are still together. They painted the house like a week and a half ago. Now he's looking to like regrout a bathroom. And so, like,
oh my God, that's awesome.
At least you got something to do.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing. I went to Ralph's earlier, and which they don't have those in Chicago, right? What's the Kroger grocery store in Chicago?
Well, they do have Kroger.
Okay.
And they have, God, I go to Costco, but yeah, Kroger's still like the chain out here. But God, we're like so spoiled here. You can go Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Costco, like whatever. They're also, one of my favorite places to go in Chicago are Mexican groceries. Like the produce is super cheap and it's really
so
good.
Cheap. I know, it's so cheap. Like when I used to live up in North Hollywood, there was a spot like that close to that apartment, and like, man, you could score on some produce.
Oh yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I've always lived close to one until I moved to the place that I'm in right now. So they were, I'd go there and I'm like, 10 limes for $1? That's cool.
Yeah, no.
Margaritas
Right.
this week.
Yeah, game on. Man, so what have you been up to? What's have you been staying busy?
Well, I try to keep a pretty, well, I shouldn't say tight schedule, but I try to basically do I have a bunch of buckets. For the first couple weeks of this, I was playing Grease. My main gig is playing at the Marriott Theatre, which is a theater outside of Chicago. And I finished playing Grease, and then the week after that, I was basically just waking up, working out, eating breakfast, and then I just try to do something creative for like 2 or 3 hours. So typically that's either writing for my group, or the artist Kimbra?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I joined her, Patreon, however you want to say it. I'm sure there is one way. But and she's like been putting out some stems from some of her songs, so I've been having a really great time digging into those, and I've like remixed a couple of her songs, and it's just
cool.
Yeah, it's just a really fulfilling exercise. I learn a lot just about like she worked with Rich Costi, who's one of my favorite mixers and producers, and to be able to listen to a stem from that he mixed is like, just that in itself is like a pretty fantastic study. So I've been having a really good time doing that, and yeah, writing for my group. We're hopefully recording at the end of July.
Nice. I don't know much about Kimbra. Obviously, I know her work with Gautier.
Yeah.
And my friend Frank Abraham was doing a bunch of road gigs with her for a while.
Oh, cool.
And that's like kind of all I know. I haven't really checked out much of her stuff. Maybe there's like mentally such a long list of things I need to check in on as far as listening goes, and she's on the list. I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, the track she just put out, at least she put out the stems to it. This track like came out in 2014 or 15. It's called Miracle, and Thundercat is playing bass on it and singing, and so it's really fun to hear his work in that detailed of a way. But I mean, that record, man, she collaborated with so many people on that. Lots of writers, but she's just the total package. She's an incredible producer in her own right, and a vocalist. I mean, she's just great. So that'd be a cool song to start with.
Nice. Thundercat. I remember I got I got emailed some tracks. I was playing on this. My friend Rocky is a hip hop producer, and he was like just finished the Kendrick record.
Mm-hmm.
The one that blew all the way up, and I forget the name of it, because D'Angelo came out with one at that time, right? And I always forget which one is To Pimp a Butterfly.
Yeah, so that's Kendrick, and then Black Messiah was
okay, that was D'Angelo.
Yeah.
So he just finished To Pimp a Butterfly, and he sent me some tracks to play on, and I sent him back, and he was like, "Man, make it sound more like Thundercat." And I knew Thundercat was on the Kendrick record. And I'm like, okay, well, I've never really checked out Thundercat. Like, Thundercat's piano player is a friend of mine, and so like that's kind of just where I stopped with Thundercat. Like, I never really got into him. And I went and started checking out a bunch of Thundercat. I'm like, I don't play like that at all. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, he that Kendrick album, the first track on that, Wesley's Theory, George Clinton is on it, and it was one of those things, like, I remember listening to that the first time, and I'm just like, man, George Clinton is just such a through line for so much, like, deeply influential music. And he is just like, when you look at someone like Dr. Dre, you're just, I'm sure they've spoken about this many times, but it's just like, man, when you hear the first Chronic album, you go, cool, so you really did just sample P-Funk like for an entire album.
Right.
And then he's obviously a brilliant producer, but you listen back to that, you go, oh, it's P-Funk, just with
Yeah.
an updated production.
Same with Doggy Style, like Snoop's Doggy Style, like
Yeah.
Parliament all over that thing.
Yeah, and so I just like, man, I just look at George Clinton. I'm like, man, he is just this through line for so many different acts.
Yeah.
And is just, I mean, man, he's got one of the best Instagrams out there. I don't care.
Oh, I haven't checked that out.
Oh my God, man, that guy, you know, he, that is like the definition of living. But I mean, he's had a hard, you know, hard life in some ways too. But man, what an incredible creative output for a career.
Yeah. What's the nature of the band that you write for?
My band, we started off more, I guess, in the alternative rock realm. Like we got compared to Muse all the time.
Okay.
And more just, I'd say, instrumentally than anything. But
are you coming at it with those kind of sonics? Like, are you playing key bass on it as well? Like, is it really kind of produced electronic element to it?
Yeah, I played. I play bass guitar like probably 80% of the time. But on our last EP that we did, well, I guess we had key bass on every recording we've put out, but a lot of them are just simply like sub pads, and then there will be like a distorted bass guitar over the top of it.
Okay.
But the last EP we put out, definitely it's like those 3 songs, that's it, is synth bass. So live I'm playing like key bass, and that's so that's been cool. And yeah, I've been getting into that a lot more, and I really enjoy programming. So that's been well, I mean, I've been doing that forever, but it's a nice thing to dig deeper and deeper into.
Right. Like, yeah, again, like when I chose my lanes within the world of bass and within the world of music, like I really just I stay in my lane. I never really got into production. I have tried to produce a couple records. I think 2 have made them out into the world.
Uh-huh.
And it's just, I don't know. I can't. My head just doesn't go there. I don't think I work well in those scenarios.
Yeah, it's you know, I think it's cool sometimes. I mean, like going back to this idea of like having these stems and just seeing, or I should say, hearing what a production, like a really great production, sounds like, and you're just kind of like, cool. They clearly got all great people in this room for this, right. But then you also wonder, were there a lot of outtakes that just didn't work at all? How long did it take them to get to this? How much input was from the executive producer, Rich Costi? How much input was from Kimbra? And it's always like, I think the cool thing about working in a collaborative setting is that you're always like, obviously trying to figure out something that will yield the sauce that everybody wants.
Sure.
But producing that, it's like taking that, the view from the top. Yeah, it's not for everybody. And it's cool when it's to me, I'm sometimes always like really happy when I'm doing something and I go, okay, I'm not good at this. That's great. That's great. I'm really glad I understand this is not my thing.
Right. That's actually why I got in. That's why I ended up being involved with the production on those 2 records, is to see if I liked it, to see if I liked the process, to see if I, how I worked within it and all that. I'm personally happy, just geeking out on bass lines, and you guys do that. Like I'll stay over here and, hopefully be the specialist within this side of the thing. You guys go and do that. You do it well. I'm not going to try to double dip and, suck at something you're already doing better than me.
Totally. And I think it's also, one of the things I really actually enjoy about working in theater is when you're like doing the initial rehearsal day or multiple rehearsals for a show, my whole thing is always like, it's like going to the studio. You're like, cool. And, I got the music ahead of time. I have these, maybe I'll have a part, usually in a show, you have a part written out, sometimes you get slashes, but you go in there with maybe a tone that, like I just played Grease. So I'm putting flats on an old P bass and I'm going to go in there and kind of get that type of sound. And I have a good relationship with my music director, so I typically will just like send him an email in advance if there's any question to the sonic approach, and say, hey, do you think something more like this or more like this? And he'll say, I like that a lot more. But I really, in a way, it's like great not having those decisions put into your hands more than just offering
Right.
a couple different directions, and then someone else can have that eagle-eye view of everything. Go, no, that actually works a lot more. And you go, cool, no problem. Now I'll just execute the part.
Right. Yeah. No, I really like that too. When it's just cool, tell me what to do. Great, I'll do that. Because then if it gets into too much, well, let me make sure I say this correctly. If given the option of like, no, do what you want to, cool, and then you make the best musical decision you can, then I'm gonna be a little bit pissed. Not super pissed, but I'm gonna be a little bit pissed. We're like, yeah, no, not that. Well, why? Why? Because like I feel like I really took all things into consideration. Like you're rejecting. What do you want then? And they'll tell me something completely different. I'm like, okay, that's why don't you just tell me that?
Oh man, I did a session for a friend a few months ago, and I think it was on a bridge or something, and I had pre-recorded some ideas just to send over to him to make sure we were on the same page before we actually got in the room together. And sure. I show up, and it was one of those classic hey man, I really like the direction, could you just make it like 50% simpler?
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure, no problem. And It was one of those things. I thought the bass line was cool. I thought it worked. I didn't think it got in the way of the vocal at all.
Sure.
And it was just this little step out moment on the track, and it just got shot down. And it was like, cool, I just gotta, that's not my decision, so no problem.
Right. I feel like they, from my experience, there's not a lot of maybe understanding of what the impact could be with a more active bass part.
Mm-hmm.
The tune it was a big deal for a minute. It was a Charlie Puth tune called Attention.
Oh yeah, man, that chorus bass line is awesome.
And I remember like the first time I heard it, I was living with one of my friends who owned a studio, and I'm like, dude, check this out. Like everything about this track is completely killing.
Yeah.
Everything. Like sonically it's happening. Like what the tune is about is great. Like how they produce it, everything is amazing about this tune. Mm-hmm. And I loved that there was such an active bass part in it as well.
Yeah. So again, I go back to this idea. Maybe this is out there somewhere online, but I'm really curious how that part came to be. Was the bass line there first? Was the song there? I don't know if it was a Jamario artist that recorded that, because I know Dimitri, he's tall bassist on Instagram.
Yeah. I know Dimitri. I've asked him to be on. He was doing the road gig for a while. I asked him to do the podcast and haven't heard back.
Yeah, I'm curious how that bass line came to be.
Yeah.
What order it came in. In a way, it's just a nerd thing to know that, but it is it's an awesome bass line. It's so cool to hear that on a huge pop song.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And without it having it's just pop. It's not like Jamiroquai neo disco.
Sure. Yep.
Pop,
that's right.
But it's like straight down the middle pop on everybody's radio pop.
Yes.
Is on the Patreon thing where you get the stems, is there any kind of behind the music information about Signal Chain or how they produced any aspect of it?
It wasn't. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if anyone. Sometimes people post questions. Kimber's great at responding to people, and she's done a ton. There's a ton of content out there on her talking about her creative approach and everything. But I don't know if I've seen anything on Signal Chains for that particular tune. But she's done a bunch of different interviews for audio companies where she'll go through some of her live setup, because she has a pretty intense vocal setup that she does live, where she'll loop herself, and she'll control all her own effects and everything. She's
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, she's a brilliant technician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to your band. It's got a Muse vibe.
They're always described. I mean, they're just kind of it's epic, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah.
I think with them, I'm not here to define any group for anyone else, but it becomes more and more challenging, I think, the further you get in your career, not to to keep just pushing into new spaces. And and then also I think if you've been unbelievably successful, there's some like level maybe that pressure that you feel, it's like, okay, cool, here's the formula, like, let's not completely run away from it, let's tweak it. But of course, I mean, some of my favorite artists run away, always run away. The next thing's always totally different, yet it somehow glues together because it's that person that keeps being involved. So
sure.
I think
who are those artists for you?
Oh, like Bowie for sure.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's like the, in some ways, like in culturally, like the one of the people that's done that. Man, really putting me on the spot here. Might have to edit this while I think about this for a second. Sometimes I like really think about instrumentalists more just because of my background. Like,
sure.
Take like Marcus Miller, for instance. It's like he's played on so many recordings. Like some of my favorite work of his is playing with Brian Ferry, and like Brian Ferry is in I mean, for anyone who already doesn't know this, I'm sure most do, but Brian Ferry was the lead singer in this band called Roxy Music. And then after Roxy Music, Brian Ferry had this incredible solo career. I mean, he's still putting records out. And I remember hearing his album that came out in 2006. And Marcus, and I heard this track, and it was just this little interlude. It was called BF Interlude. And I'm just hearing this bass. I'm like, okay, cool. That's definitely Marcus Miller. Like, no one else sounds like that. And it was just crazy. And so anyway, I guess I really admire people like him. I mean, for many reasons, but also he just plays on so many different things, and he's still him on all of those things. And so in some ways, maybe I find that to be something to, go for. Justin Meldal Johnson's the same in to me, like, I got to know him when I was like 12, and Odelay came out with Beck, and his bass playing was on that. And I strangely at 12 was just like, oh my God, I don't know why, but this is awesome. Yeah. And he's been one of those, I've followed his career as long as anybody in the music industry. And he's one of those people, no matter who he works with, it's like always him. Yeah. And that's just such a God, that's what we all go after.
Yeah, within the bass player world, Pino is that for me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like, I mean, I was just talking about him on a podcast I pre-recorded earlier this week, and that dude, it's insane. It's insane. Like 9 Inch Nails, Jay Dilla, Celine Dion, Tears for Fears, Adele, Ed Sheeran. After like really digging into the information that's out there on his discography, pretty much if I've liked the track in my life, it's Pino on bass. Like, that's what I find out. Like, oh man, that was him too. I love that song.
So there's this guy that occupies this other space in my life that I didn't really know that he occupied until I realized everything that he recorded. And it's this bass player, Preston Crump.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, and like, he played, Outkast, Goody Mob, like, all the southern, kind of southern funk, hip hop that was coming out during that huge era with Organized Noise. And
he's also on Britney Spears' huge breakout record, right? Like Hit Me Baby One More Time, I think is Preston.
I did not know that, but when you think about the timing of when all that music was coming out, it makes sense that people would be like, who is this bass player on all these incredible records?
Yeah.
And so that makes sense to me. But he's one of those people that when I listen to, I'm just like, oh my God, he's like on the soundtrack of my life.
Mhm.
Coming up when I did and listening to the records that I did as as I was, getting older. And yeah, those people, like now one of my, I mean, it's just kind of a little project. It's nothing crazy, but I just kind of keep a Spotify playlist of all of these like really influential tracks. And I slowly, like sometimes once every couple weeks, I'll just transcribe like my favorite 8 or 16 from it.
Yeah.
And then I'll just post it on my Instagram, and I'll like, always try to find the person there and tag them and everything. And it's actually led to some like kind of cool interactions. Like Preston actually responded to me on one of them. And I just wrote him like, dude, man, like, thank you for everything. You've
Yeah.
been hugely influential on me. And
Dude, did you just when he hits you back, did you just fanboy out a little bit? There's been 2 specific times on Instagram where I just straight up fanboyed out. Like Lee Sklar responded to me
oh
once.
wow, that's awesome.
And like I hopped in my car and drove to the Troubadour that night.
Yeah.
Like to go meet Lee.
Yeah, it was cool. I think he just left a comment or something, or he liked something. So I forget what the actual interaction was, but it's just kind of like, man, there's so many people that have worked in this industry for so long that are, have contributed at just an exceptional level for like a whole career, and like,
Yeah.
no one knows their name, and it's like just, it's my own small way of, it's almost like, a digital journal of music
Yeah.
that I really like, and then just trying to say, hey, this is the person that was a part of that, unbelievable collaboration. And that's
Right.
that it feels good to do that. And, of course, just revisit this music that I've loved for so many years.
Yeah, there's something about that. I mean, maybe maybe it's my age, like I'm coming up on 40 here in a few years. Kind of rediscovering old music has kind of been my thing for the last, like, I don't know, year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how you can go back to a record you started listening to when you were 14, and, 20 plus years later, you're just like, oh my gosh, I hear this completely differently. Like,
Right.
I think about them like, oh, that's an interesting tone or EQ decision for the rack
Yeah.
and you're like, at 13, you're just like, I have youthful angst. That is
Yeah.
the only thing I know.
Right.
This is helping that. But that's like, it is really fun and satisfying to do that. I also, man, I make a real point to listen to new music every single week. And
That's good. I like that you're staying disciplined about that, because I don't.
but it's cool. Like everyone goes through phases with that. I think there's such an, the ecosystem now of how people discover artists, and it's, different for everyone. It's so profoundly different from when we grew up. And
Yes.
so I try to stay, not like, it's not about staying on trends. I still gravitate to the stuff that I think is really cool. Like when I heard that bassist I mentioned, Justin Meldal Johnson, when I heard he produced Paramore's last album, I
Mm.
had never, I had listened to the big hits by Paramore and I never really got into them. And I was like, okay, if he's working on this, I've got to listen to this because I'm just interested in this combination. And it is a
Right.
super musical album. And
Hmm.
it's straight up pop. It's really different from previous Paramore records. But when you run an album or music through somebody like JMJ, there's almost like there's no way it's not going to turn out in a pretty different way. And I remember
Sure.
listening to it, I'm like, wow, this is a really, really cool album. And if I wasn't like trying to stay open for that, I never would have discovered that. And that ended up being one of my favorite pop albums of the year.
Man, I think that what you just said is a really crucial thing to any musician, is just staying open to music.
And I just think it's such an exciting time because you don't, like, if you don't like it, it's like fine. There's something out there for you, and there are a bunch of other people that also like that thing. No matter what, if you do some work, you're going to find something that really resonates with you, and then just go do more of that and support that group or individual or whatever. But I just, I want to stay on this topic a little. I joke with the guys in my band, in particular the drummer that I work with. His name is Devin Staples, monster player. And I always give him a hard time, just like joking around. I'm like, man, the thing with musicians that never ceases to amaze me is like the idea of like trying to be cool all the time and like not, and like the whole idea of like, if you really dig something, not actually showing that you're enthusiastic about it, and just kind of being like, like shrug about it. And I'm like, as you can probably tell, I've always been the kind of guy, I'm like, dude, if I like something, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell the next person. I'm going to try to spread the word.
Exactly.
And I just like, I'll never not be like that, because I just get too excited about music every single day of my life.
Yeah.
To like ever, if I really hear something and I dig it, I'm not just going to like shrug and then not,
Right. I got to keep this musician cool
yeah
atmosphere going. Yeah.
I just like, I guess to some degree, acting like that doesn't really resonate me. And like, I want to be clear. I don't care that people act like that. I just find it to be funny. And
it's a funny part of musician culture.
Yes. I think it's good to define why you don't like something. I actually think it's good to work through that. I don't find working through it in a public space, in a rant style, is something that's productive for me. I will say, however, that I do enjoy a good rant, but
love the rant. Yeah.
It's also the kind of, I think the idea is, too, with music, it's like, okay, what was the purpose of creating this music? And if you're going to get upset at a dance track that doesn't have enough harmonic, deep harmonic language in it, you could be wasting your time.
Yes.
That might not be the best thing to spend your time doing. So I'm always like trying to identify sometimes, if I'm getting to, this level, like, what was the purpose of this track in the first thing? What was the vibe the artist was trying to get across in, in this composition? And if they've largely succeeded in that, like if you're listening to like a Robin track and everybody's dancing at 3 a.m. in the club, there's a significant amount of success to that production. I do think too that having gripes about pop music or whatever you're talking about, it's still like, it's a good thing to be critical. Like, just, I guess sometimes it's in particular when you talk to somebody who's like obviously angry at a lot more than just the song, then you're just like,
that's what it is. They're angry about their childhood or something.
Yeah,
They're just taking it out on Kanye.
Yeah, it's like, man, if you're actually just really this angry, I probably maybe just don't want to talk to music about music with you.
Right.
Because I like being critical about things too. I think that's how we, one of the ways we learn and get better. But
of course,
to just have a complete session for hour after hour, I don't think probably does a lot of people very much good. Although I simultaneously love Bill Burr, the comedian. So
yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Right. No, huge fan. I think I like angling all my rants at the jazz musician culture because that's also a community that's very opinionated more often than not.
Yeah.
But claims to be super open-minded. But you get to a certain point and they're not at all.
Yeah.
And they're equally as opinionated. So I kind of like to personally aim my rants that way because they've I feel like they've already entered the rant circle. They're already pro rant about some, like, okay, cool, then let's rant. They can voice their opinions about how nothing is hip anymore, or jazz isn't jazz, or whatever the rants are. Yeah, so I like to angle all mine at them. It doesn't make any point to like rant at pop culture because I don't feel like the majority of those people are as opinionated about music as the jazz musician is.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, totally. I mean, when you've spent so much time on your craft, I think it in some ways comes with the territory, and you have to work really hard when you're outside of the circles. Cause yeah, of course it's like, if I'm, hanging out with another musician who like we're on the same gig and we're doing a theater run and we've played the show like 50 times in a row, like who else are you going to share that with?
Right.
It's like, I'm not going to share it with someone that's not in it, because then, this whole thing turns, wow, they're really like, seem to be irritated about this very specific thing. And you go, no, I'm actually fine.
Yeah.
You're right. This is highly specific. This is for a very narrow set of people. And that in a way too is like kind of that, professional solidarity is one of, I think, the greatest things about, or what I should say, one of the greatest, but it's a nice thing about being part of a subgroup of people, is you can, one line and everyone can like laugh about something that's hyper specific content.
Right. Right. I completely agree. Agree. Now, I don't play a lot of shows, theater productions. Like I just got done with one. They ran from like October to January, and it sounds like you play a lot more of those than me. How do you kind of just still stay mentally engaged with this same music, night after night? Like, let's say you're doing, I don't know, what's standard, four shows a week, like Thursday and a double on Sunday or something.
Yeah, mine's an 8-show-a-week schedule, Wednesday
Oh
through
wow.
Sunday. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I tend to get I try to get fixated on details, and I take a lot of pride in trying to do the same thing every night. And it's all show dependent, of course. Like if you are playing a show that has some like, big band type stuff or whatever, and you just get changes, it can be fun to switch those up, but then you have to like think about, okay, what's the keyboard playing? And sometimes, the keyboard will actually play the walking bass line. I know. But there are sonic reasons for that too. In particular, if you're in a space where the bass is not tracking well on stage, the vocalist really actually needs it.
Sure.
So if you're doing something like that where there's doubling, you actually do need to play the same thing every night. But if you have more freedom, you can stretch out a little bit more. But to me, I just not every night's different, where some nights it's harder than others to like really stay in it psychologically. But for me, I just get a lot of pleasure out of taking something and trying to make it better throughout the run.
Sure.
And also simply just challenging myself to play really consistently. Like I came up in playing both classical and I played in like high school big band and did a couple tours and all that. But I really went in school, I was really doing the classical track and doing other stuff on the outside. But so one of the things in the classical world is like when you're preparing for orchestral auditions, it's like, just can you play this excerpt 10 times in a row, and can you play it at an extremely high level all 10 times? And so in a way, I suppose that kind of mentality translated really well into doing show work. But I don't know, man. I think it's like in some ways, really, I'm not saying these are the same, but the mentality of like going in and kind of being selfless to the production is nice. And like I was saying earlier, I really enjoy going in and having other people say, this is what we're going for, make it happen, or this is exactly what we want you to do, and then I'll make that happen, or at least I'll try my best to make it happen. And so I guess to answer your question, I just I just try to go in there every night and play my best and understand what the larger infrastructure is that I'm participating in. Like if you go in there and you want to play something different every single night, this probably isn't your gig. And even though it's a consistent paycheck and all those things, you're probably going to be kind of miserable. So if you can't readjust yourself psychologically for what this gig is, it's just not, it's not for you, and that's cool.
Right.
Like, I've played with a lot of really good players who I'd say show work is probably not the thing that they really want to be doing, and that
Sure.
and that's it, it's like we were saying earlier, it's good to know when something isn't for you, because then you don't have to be upset about it anymore.
Right, exactly. Right, you're right. You're not frustrated because someone else is working, 8 gigs a week, and you got a couple that are maybe highly creative,
Yeah.
but the work isn't the same at the same volume. But it's like, okay, well, that's fine. They can do that. Like, I don't want to do that, or that's not for me, or whatever. I mean, I think we all fundamentally want to work as much as possible.
Sure.
But realizing that, like, okay, that's not for me. I was just talking about this too on the same podcast that I recorded earlier this week about being okay with that. Just being okay with, like, you know what? Show work isn't my thing. For me personally, I like to do one a year and I'm good.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's something different than all the other stuff I do. Well, one a year is fun. And I'm good and I'm engaged. If I had more than one, or if I was on a, touring show or something, I'd get dark super quick.
Yeah.
And I don't want that, because I can stay at home. I don't have to be on the road to get super dark.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, man, that ends up being really contagious, and then the whole thing can tank.
Right.
And no one's in a good place, and it's just yeah, I think I mean, a lot of it's just like inner work, to be honest. It's just like some personalities just bend towards not being the right fit. And if you're on the edge, I think there are some things you can do to, just inner work to try to make it, to basically, I always say, I think I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing it, and just being like, this serves this function in my life.
Right.
I'm fortunate that I get stuff out of it, but man, that's not the only thing I do. I do other things, and that's what helps keep it balanced. I also just think sometimes our culture has really been bent towards this way of, like, if you're currently not feeling good about whatever, you need to make a wholesale change. There's no tweaking. There's no, like, trying to right the ship a little bit. You need to completely change everything that you're doing, your entire mindset. And I have found, if there's something I'm not, like, really satisfied with, you start by making some tweaks to see if that makes a difference. Like, I know right now with this whole, virus, I think a lot of people are probably struggling to, like, find meaning in their day, because
Sure.
you don't necessarily have a lot of people in our world don't have work.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I've found this entire time, I mean, minus just the anxiety of this thing,
Right.
to be actually kind of like, all right, well, this is what the situation is. So how can we build within this framework to make for a day where I'm doing stuff that I enjoy? And that could be a transcription. I was playing Bach earlier today. I taught a lesson.
Nice.
And I'll probably, take a walk around the neighborhood. But, it's just like, you don't have to do a wholesale change necessarily. You just need to make a tweak. And so it's like exactly what you were saying with, okay, I acknowledge that I'm really missing this. Cool. Let's try to get a little bit of that back in my diet.
Yeah. And always just trying to stay engaged and not look for my gigging life to completely fulfill all of my artistic and musical interests.
That's really dangerous. I mean, that's like, dating or being with somebody and expecting, like, every single interest you share is gonna be exactly the same, and, like, 100% of the relationship is, like, gonna be perfect. It's like, what? That doesn't happen in anything.
No, it doesn't.
It's an unreasonable expectation.
100%. And I think about it a lot in terms of that model, because I've been married before, and, like, I couldn't have put on her to be like, well, you got to joke around like the guys do,
Mm-hmm.
Or like if I come home after a gig, you probably don't want to go to a diner and talk about the gig. Like there's different outlets for different things. And all that being said, musically, it's I think it's the exact same. And I think it's cool that you're working on the original project.
Yeah, it's a real labor of love. You just, at least in my group, when it ceases to be fun, and we've had a couple moments, I think, where we've collectively, been like, okay, this has been too much of this. Like, let's get back to the basics of just why are we even still doing this thing? Ah, that's right. We really like making music together.
Right.
Cool. Let's make sure that becomes a focus. So it's like 90% of my time is not spent booking, because
Right.
that's just now I just, again, it's like compartmentalizing these tasks.
What's the name of the band?
Molehill, like mountain out of a molehill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What do you guys got out so far? You got some records out or some stuff on Spotify or something?
Yeah, we put out a full length. We put out 3 EPs and a couple singles. So you can get a pretty decent idea, and we're all over the socials, YouTube, all that stuff. So
pre-corona, how are bookings going? Are you guys staying specific to Chicago? All that? Are you doing like some regional runs? Are you playing outside the city and the state?
We toured a lot more in the past. Like, we probably played 400 or 500 dates as a band, like from Omaha to New York. And
okay.
We toured more in the past, and we're mainly more sticking to Chicago and regional. We were out in Corning, New York. We got played at Corning Glass Museum. Actually, it was a really fun gig. So we're more in Chicago now. Just, everyone's getting older, and things get complicated with touring and all that. But we still try to go out every couple months, even if it's just for a long weekend or something, and do that. And we really love playing live together. So we try to do that as much as we can. So yeah.
Is the other guys in the group, are they working guys, like working musician guys, or are they? Because I know that can be. Having a band that's a band when everybody's, gigging for their livelihood is a huge scheduling complication.
Yeah, Devin, the drummer, he's he and I are like kind of the guys working musicians. His main gig is like he plays at church on Sunday, and rehearsals Thursday, and then he freelances with other people in between that. And then the keyboard player and lead singer, they have day jobs, but we make it work. I gotta say, like, the other 3 guys in my band are like 3 of the coolest dudes, who are like at their core very kind and generous people.
That's
which
huge. Yeah.
Which, like, and there's still disagreements and conflicts, but the simple fact is that the 3 of them would be there for you if something went down, and that in itself is like, kind of the glue that keeps this thing together and keeps people being respectful and all that. So
I think that it's necessary to a certain point to have disagreements, because that means everybody is feeling comfortable enough and safe enough in the environment to voice their personal concerns and interests. Because if someone is just going to be like, yeah, sure, whatever you want to do, that means that they're not that invested.
Yeah, for sure. It's I mean, the lead singer and I, Peter, we have worked together for so many years at this point. I mean, we've gotten some pretty big disagreements about some stuff, but I feel, we've always been able to resolve it over a period of time, or sometimes immediately, and that there's just a level of mutual respect, and if that ever leaves, you're in big trouble.
Right.
So
right. That's when things that's when it's not cool. It's like, I'd be fine. I'm fine with the disagreements. Like, okay, cool. That means you have an opinion that you feel passionately about. Great.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, so do I. Now we just got to figure out where the middle is to all this. Because when there's not that, then there's just somebody, or maybe more than one person, is just a yes man, it's like, well, then I can find anybody who's that. Like, you're not really bringing much to the table. Bring some opinions, bring some ideas, bring something to the table.
Yeah,
instead of just going with the flow all the time. Like, working wise, I think we're all aware that we're disposable. But coming from this, a core situation where you guys are friends too, there's a personal connection there, which I think is huge and will always, always get communicated in the music.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ryan, I'm sorry, man. I got to end this thing, unfortunately.
Oh, all good, man. All good. Thanks for the time. I know you had told me you had somewhere to be.
Yeah.
No worries, man. We'll have you back on.
Yeah, it was awesome to chat with you, man. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, likewise, dude. We'll stay in touch.
All right. Sounds great, man. Talk to you.
All right. Peace.
All right, that was my talk with Trevor. He did let me know that he had like a small window to have a conversation, and I wasn't keeping track of the time. I'm obviously glad he was, but so maybe the ending sounds a little bit more abrupt than it was. Like I knew about it, but I wasn't paying attention. That's on me. I was like getting caught up in all these like rambling rants about things, which is funny because him and I were discussing the nature of rants. But I edited some of that out because it was annoying, and I think because of this quarantine situation, like, and not engaging with people, regularly, I'm just kind of stuck at the apartment. But I get on a podcast and I just won't shut up. And so I cut a lot of that out and then emailed Trevor and apologized for rambling like an idiot. That happened. Yeah, that's that, folks. That was a good time with Trevor. I feel like he's gonna be back. We're gonna check in with him again. I like Trevor a lot, and I like what he's up to and the work him and Jason Heath are doing. Definitely check out Contrabass Conversations if you are not a listener already. Clearly, you're listening to podcasts, so go check out that one. I like that podcast a lot. That's what I got on that, folks. That's Trevor's story, and I will catch you on the next one.